It's the Growler with PD and J. Here to analyze for you today. From Growler bad to Jay's got stats. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Growler Podcast.
All right, welcome into the latest edition of PD and J. Pauliner Jr., Jay Morrison. Excited to be with you. Wonky schedule week, so we're coming to you on a Wednesday morning here, which is not in our normal routine. I'm not normally a Wednesday guy. I got errands I like to run on Wednesday mornings when I'm not recording, but we're off this week with the Monday night game. We're here for you. What's up, Jay?
Hey, I'm happy to be here at any time. So yeah, it is a little different. A night practice tonight. That's going to be unique. But we're flexible. We adjust. We do what needs to be done.
I am mentally flexible.
Exactly.
I'm not physically flexible, but I'm here anyway to be here with you. All right, make sure everybody, if you are watching on YouTube, thank you. You can hit the QR code if you want to get to any of our merchandise, any of our podcast platforms. You can go, please subscribe, ring the bell, do all those things, give us ratings. We always appreciate that. Thanks again to everybody that came out to our live show. It was such a great time the other day down at BetMGM Nation Kitchen and Bar. The Bengals was just an awesome venue. Our next live show is going to be on the 27th of October, the Philadelphia game. That'll be a noon kick for us and a 4 o'clock game for the Bengals. So come on down. We're going to have the same party again, and lots more information coming on that as we go forward. Of course, if you came down to our show this week and you had a losing ticket, oh boy, did they get anything for you? The second chance drawing, Jay, you know how it is. They already had a bunch of tickets in the hopper. I saw that the other day.
They did, but those people still have to come back and show up. You have a good chance of winning if you go down there, and you can turn your ticket in anytime, but make sure you're there on Thursday for the draw at halftime of the Monday night or the Thursday night game.
Yeah, you can win $100 in bonus bets and Nation gift cards, or $50 and $50, or $25 and $25. They do that as a second chance drawing for all of us losers out there to still get their money back. So go on down there. And of course, it's a great place to go. nationkitchenandbar.com. You can reserve tables for any big event. Some people decided to reserve tables themselves for our big event, and it went well. They were able to get a nice spot. You can do it at any point. They have a link right there on the site. All right. Let's get some news real quick before we get into Mo. The news yesterday, Trent Brown out for the year. Tough for Trent Brown. The Trent Brown experience last 2 weeks. All of that consternation during free agency and planning and drafting and having this whole thing set up and the depth they're going to have at tackle. Well, off it goes as Trent Brown's out for the year. He did get you the 2 games until Amarius Mims was fully healthy. So that was kind of what you needed. And Amarius Mims now will fully take over. And you kind of wonder if that wouldn't have been what would have happened anyway, Jay. Yeah. Even if Trent Brown stayed fully healthy. But, that move happens immediately and the depth takes a hit.
Yeah. I mean, we even talked about it on the live show. I thought that's the way it would go, that they would get his feet wet against Washington, and then good chance we would see him start against Carolina. Now he's definitely going to start against Carolina. I mean, injuries, even a guy that's injury prone, it's still an unpredictable nature, but they had to have been planning for this, knowing that it's just the chances of Trent Brown playing a full season were pretty remote. I don't think anybody expected it to happen this fast. You would I talked to Marius after the game, and he talked about how, and I don't think it was lip service, how valuable Trent had been. And he was the first one that went up to him in the locker room after they found out that the injury was as severe as it was. And, that's a hit, even though they have Amarius to play. If it's just a switch, a changing of the guard, so to speak, Trent's still there and he's helping Amarius along the way. But when a guy has a season-ending injury, he's not around the team in most cases. Maybe Trent does. Maybe Trent steps up and he's there every day and he's helping Amarius along. But it would have been so much better to just have that be a clean switch and then have Trent Brown as a go-to if Amarius struggles. But I'm excited to see what Mims can do. They drafted him at 18 for a reason. They're excited about his potential. I do think this is a good way to kind of ease him in against a Carolina team that doesn't. They're not loaded with pass rushers. So excited to see what he can do in a full game as the starting right tackle. It was kind of up and down against Washington, being thrust into that role that he wasn't quite expecting.
Yeah, one particularly rough moment where he got beat inside. But outside of that, I mean, you can see it. I mean, his patience, his power, his anchor, like it's all there. I mean, the first play, he ends up 10 yards down the field. Poor Jeremy Chin is like, did not anticipate this being what was coming at me right now. And so you can see the potential where you can, what were we calling it? This third and Mims. Where it's a short yardage thing, you can go try to run behind him and let them plow the path. The hit is what's going to happen at tackle. I think there's probably an expectation that probably right now Cody Ford is the first guy off just because of skin's on the wall. But I wonder if Jackson Kirkland wouldn't be somebody who would get that call when you consider what he did in preseason. And I thought he looked better than Cody Ford in preseason, but Cody Ford being somebody that has been their go-to as the 6th offensive lineman last year, potentially is probably that guy, but we'll get a little bit more answers on that as we talk to Pitch and Zach Taylor over the course of today.
Yeah, and I mean Monday night it was Jackson Kirkland that was the guy, the offensive lineman that was inactive. It wasn't Cody, so maybe that's
right.
A hint right there what direction they would go.
Yep, exactly right. Okay, another thing. Let's just kind of touch on one takeaway beyond what we talked about on the walkout. That you have on whether it be on second watch or second stat dive or whatever you got. Well, one more thing from Sunday before we get into Mo.
Yeah, it wasn't so much on the rewatch. It was in the moment, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but as bad as that was, the defense, and they couldn't, no pressure, they couldn't get a stop. It always felt like they were. You've seen this before where Lou's defense finds a way at the end of the game. And I thoroughly expected them to do that. And the fact that it never happened, that they never got a single stop against a rookie quarterback, it was really surprising. Even though you watch it for 2 hours, 50 minutes, 2.5 hours, you've seen it before and you expect that defense to come up in the big moment, and the fact that they never did, it was a little jarring. And it's something you're not going to face an offense like that this week in Carolina. You expect them to kind of get right, but the more I thought about it, is like, it never really felt. It felt like if they lost the game, it would be because they would get the ball back to the offense and maybe the offense wouldn't finish. But I never expected that defense to just give up a touchdown on not a touchdown, but give up points on every single drive.
Yeah. And, because we'd seen, even if you think back to some of the worst games that they've had, Houston last year, the Mike White Jets debacle, right? Like they've had these games where they have gotten big stops at the end, even when they play poorly. Against Houston, Cam Taylor-Britt had a pick 6 to get them back into a game that looked lost. Against the Jets, they thought they had to stop, and there was penalties and weird stuff at the end. But like they made plays to help their offense get back into it because the offense was keeping them close. You did, this is going to be like one of those where they're bad all day and they get the one. And now Jaden Daniels had maybe the throw of the year, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what it took. And that's a Next Gen Stats has a 10% completion chance on that ball into the corner to McLaurin, and that's probably what it was. That said, he made the play, and they didn't make any plays, and they don't. There was no reason to believe they were going to get a stop, and Jane Daniels did make a great throw there. But that said, they didn't do enough the entire game to be there. Maybe this is that's when it becomes, is this the new normal, right? And is this the way this is going to be, or was this just a bad night? We'll learn a little bit more going forward. I'll get to mine here. I want to bring in Mo first, and because we got us rolling already on this defensive topic, and I know that's not going to be something that we are going to avoid as we get in with Mo. All right, now let's bring in our friend and yours from ESPN 1530, Mo Egger, joining us from inside of somewhere today. Nothing questionable, no parking lots, but still a quality rig. It's good to see you back here and safe and sound in your house.
It's nice to just be able to plug the laptop in and not have to worry about, people circling the car or the glare behind me, or is my hotspot going to work? This is nice.
I'm not going to lie. I did go back and rewatch your attempt to adjust from the glare and dropping of the phone last week a couple of times and enjoyed it immensely in retrospect. So thank you for all of your effort.
Well, I often thought of myself while at the game on Monday night because I kept screaming, "Figure it out!" Right? Some of us know how to figure it out. Yeah, some of us, I'm stuck in Forest Park. I'm in this spooky parking lot. This is not where I need to be or want to be. But you know what? I'm going to figure it out and do my guy Paul's podcast. I got it done. I figured it out.
Yeah,
you did. All right, let's start here. Jay and I were just here discussing this defense, and this is the obvious topic. After watching maybe the worst defensive performance in franchise history, and I honestly can't imagine too many other franchises have had any that went as bad as those 6 drives did. Where's your major gripe start in terms of the one that has the least hope to be fixed and not be written off as bad night, things went sideways, what have you? Where's your biggest gripe with what went down on Monday defensively?
Well, my biggest gripe is that it felt like, look, Cam Taylor-Britt took a lot of heat for calling it a college offense, but he was right. I think the Commanders ran like 6 plays the entire night. I mean, it was the ease with which they did it, right? There was a play on a 4th and 4 where they hit Zach Ertz, and there wasn't anybody close to him. I mean, it was remarkable. There was, and you guys were talking about in the walkthrough, the amount of, 3rd and 1s that, like, with the exception, I think, of the 3rd and 7 where Jaden Daniels dropped that dime to basically seal the game. It was never 3rd and medium, right? But there were times where it felt like, God, I know what they're going to do here, so you should stop it, and they didn't. The ease with which they did it, to me, it felt like Washington was totally unchallenged.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, man, you know what? They're just scheming them to death, or nothing against Jaden Daniels, but he's making these remarkable plays. When he was good with his legs, he wasn't like Lamar Jackson circa 2000, whatever that was, 18 or 19, just, undressing. Was it Dan Skuda?
Nick Vigil.
Nick Vigil.
I mean, Dan Skuda is personally offended by that.
I'm sorry.
Nick Vigil, totally different.
I'm trying to forget, but it wasn't him just fitting these throws in the tight windows. It was really, really easy. And so that, to me, was what was the worst part of the entire thing. It's one thing to lose. It's one thing to watch your defense get worked. Look, we know they're not good against the run. We knew that going in. That was confirmed early in the season, and those concerns were amplified when you saw who they weren't going to have when they're having to take Lawrence Guy off the street and play a not insignificant number of snaps. They're not going to be good against the run, but it just felt like Washington was totally unchallenged. And it felt like every time they gained yardage, I thought, God, I kind of thought that was the play they're going to run, or why was that so easy, or why was that guy so wide open? That, to me, was the worst part. Is some of that fixable? I think Lou Anarumo has enough of a resume that I'll defer to him and assume that maybe it doesn't look like that for the rest of the season. But I do think now, I think there's 2 things that I keep thinking about. Number one, we're to the point where I think we wonder, how do they get back into this thing in spite of their defense? Because if it gets fixed, that's one thing. But does it get fixed now? Does it get fixed, before Andy Dalton carves them up? Does it get fixed before Lamar Jackson comes to town? And if the answer is no, can they figure out a way to win in spite of their defense? And I think also, like, Trey Hendrickson is great, but without any help on the defensive line, he becomes very easy to neutralize. And then who else on that defense right now does the opposing team's offensive coordinator sit down on Monday afternoon and go, we can't let that guy ruin what we're trying to do in the game? I don't think they have anybody that you could say that about.
Yeah, and I mean, the Trey Hendrickson point is good because we saw it so much against Washington, where it's one thing not to get pressure from the other side against a quarterback that's not going to get out and run. But you saw it with Mahomes, you saw it with Jaden Daniels, where they just take off and run away from Trey Hendrickson, and that just wears him out even faster. And we saw him tapping out on multiple times. The other thing, that your college offense point, the reason a college offense is like that, where they only run 6 plays, they just say, okay, we're going to go out and out-athlete you. Yeah. You're not supposed to be able to out-athlete guys in the NFL, and that's what I think that's the big concern, is they were able to just go out and be better man-to-man against this defense, and there's no more people coming in to join to fix this, and I just think that's the big concern. I do think you get Sheldon Rankins back, you get BJ Hill back, you get a little more pass rush up the middle, but so much of it's not a direct comp, but what we saw from Jaden Daniels in Washington, it's a lot like what you're going to see, what you've seen all along from Baltimore and Lamar Jackson. It wasn't like it was this, they've never faced that kind of mobile quarterback before. So I think that was the concerning part, that they just got out-athleted in that game. And can they fix that? No matter how good Lou's schemes are they going to be able to get it figured out from the personnel standpoint and get these guys playing better on defense?
Yeah, I kept waiting or hoping for Cliff Kingsbury to go, you know what, I'm going to show everybody how smart I am. Mm-hmm. I kept waiting for it. Yeah. To the people that I was sitting with, I'm like, you know what? I need Cliff Kingsbury to go, okay, I've got all these other plays I can run. Let's break them out and then do something foolish. That obviously never happened. And then I thought about this a lot, and I talked about it briefly on my show. I sit behind the opposing team's bench, and watching that team's body language during the game and watching the confidence they played with as the game went on a night where defensively they were kind of helpless, it reminded me of the 2021 Bengals. Mm-hmm. Like it's what was fun about that year was watching that team sort of kind of figure it out in real time and feel confident in each other in real time. And so often I was watching Washington sideline, and then I was looking over at the Bengals sideline where the body language was completely different. And that, to me, I might be making too much out of it. Certainly those things are a byproduct of how the game was unfolding, but that really stood out to me. Like, they've got their quarterback, they've got their coach, they've got a really good OC. Like, hey, this is going to work, and this may work here. And man, we can do whatever we want against this team and their defense. And then you look over at the other sideline, and it was the body language that comes with a defense that's helpless to stop the other team, and the sobering reality of 0-3 setting in. That to me, that visual just being in the stadium was striking.
One thing that I remember, we would have a lot of conversations about in 21 and 22 was just what you just mentioned. The general excitement that the team felt about playing football every week, right? I mean, it popped off the page, and it's when you're 0-3, it's a hard thing to criticize because you don't expect them to be bananas when things are struggling. That said, they're built now where so much of what they're doing are these guys that have seen the business side of football and have been around for a while, and they've been to the biggest games, and they're playing in September and dealing with contracts and injury stuff and all this. And you do wonder, like, is there an energy and excitement that's lacking with this team when they take the field? And maybe that's part of some of the September struggles, or maybe that's part of the concern about where they're at today, and I don't know. Like, I would like to see what it looks like after a win or two. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go under the assumption that they'll get one of those at some point this year. So I'll wait for that. But I do wonder, like, is that part of the issue when you talk about a very, very 10,000 foot view, big picture of where they're at as a team right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There was something really striking about that. And again, like if they get off the field on 4th and 16 against Kansas City, maybe that's not something that's even on our radar. But to me, that visual where I sit was more about watching Washington and feeling kind of jealous. Not just that they were winning the game, but it's like, I know it as a fan. I know what that's like, where you feel like, okay, we've got our guy. We think we've got our coach. This feels like it's going in the right direction. Like this is just getting started. And look, the Commanders might go 5-12 this year. I don't know. But then I look over to the other side and it's just, I'm a big body language guy. And just looking over at the other side, I remember 21 and 22, just looking over there and there was energy and you just didn't see that. And it's going to be depleted when you play the way they did. But yeah, I mean, you guys were talking about how, Monday afternoon felt like, all right, season's on. Here we go. Game 1's behind us. The Chiefs game is behind us. T is back. Yeah, we got some injuries on defense, but here we go. And then it reminded me on Monday of just, all right, you put the key in, you turn it over, and it just doesn't start. And not offensively, they were fine. But that, I called it on the air the worst loss of the Zach Taylor era because it buried them at 0-3. We all know what the mathematical improbabilities of them making the playoffs are with this record. And they just got worked. I mean, Jay, you referenced, I think, yesterday that Saints game in 18, which was Marvin's last year, where like you're just helpless watching this. And it's like, holy crap, they're getting worked. That's not supposed to happen to this team. We're not supposed to be making comparisons to Marvin Lewis's last year during a season where the expectations are to compete for a championship. And yet there we are. And I think everybody was doing that. And that was so sobering. And I'm really kind of curious from an emotional standpoint, how the team itself rebounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not the 0-3 itself. It's like you said, it's how it came about. Because if you think about it, last year they avoided 0-3. Yeah. They beat LA on Monday night. They beat the Rams, but then they go 1-3 because Burrow is dealing with the calf again, and they just lay that clunker at Tennessee. So that 1-3, would that feel different? I think this 1-3 would feel better. They go to Carolina, they get the win, and then Baltimore coming here in week 5, can that be their Arizona from a year ago where it looks like everything's right on the same page? And that's the start of the season. That's when they take off and go. I think it can, but it's not getting healthy at this point. It is a little bit because you got to get Rankins and BJ Hill back, but it's more about getting things figured out and making sure it doesn't look like it looked Monday night, where you are able to come up with stops when you have to have them. And going back to what you said, that 3rd and 7, I've been thinking about this too. If that's in the second quarter, does Jaden Daniels take that shot? That was kind of a nothing to lose. The zero blitz, let's just throw it down and go for it all. And if it's earlier in the game and they had to face a 3rd and 7 and lose, zeros them, maybe he takes the check down or the hot read. But that was something that just, like you said, they were feeling themselves. And you got nothing to lose there. You don't hit it, you still kick a field goal. You still force the Bengals to drive down the length of the field. But I wonder about that. What they win in Carolina, how does this 1-3 then feel compared to last year's 1-3?
I think worse though, because here's the thing. Last year you were like, well, just get Burrow healthy already. Yeah. Like once Burrow's healthy, everything will be fine. Burrow's been healthy. Like Rankins and Hill and that defensive line have injuries. Sure, they're going to have injuries places. It can't look that bad because a couple of guys go down. And that's more concerning to me, is that it's not like last year. It was like, well, real Joe Burrow will eventually walk through that door and they're okay. Now, real BJ Hill and Sheldon Rankins walking through the door is going to change everything a little. I mean, they need some pass rush, but they shouldn't have been relying on those guys to be playing the high amount of snap counts they were in the first place. That was what we talked about back in March. And here the rant's coming on, so I'm just going to let it go here. Like this is not a secret Okay. We talked about this in March. They needed to address the defensive line more aggressively. They needed to be finding, that why we talked about Byron Murphy every single day. You guys need to be reloading in here much more aggressively. Why we talked about guys in free agency. You need to reload more aggressively. Instead, they paid Sheldon Rankins, but he's older. He's never been a full-time, go-all-the-time guy. BJ Hill, you could have made an argument on letting him go and signing someone younger, right? I mean, he was at that point in his contract. You have Hubbard, Hendrickson, Hill, and Rankins all in their late 20s, all with people wondering, is the cliff going to come for them at some point soon? And watching that, and what did you do? They did the right thing in loading up behind them with top draft picks. Day 1 and 2 picks. Miles Murphy, McKinley Jackson, Chris Jenkins, Joseph Osai, Zach Carter, all first, second, third rounders. What'd you get from those guys on Monday night when you need them? I don't have a problem with the way that it's set up, but if you're not going to be aggressive on the front end, you better hit on those draft picks. And those are both big whiffs. And that's how you end up with where you were on Monday night. And maybe those picks come along, but some of those guys I mentioned have had plenty of opportunity and aren't doing it. Okay. And Miles Murphy's hurt, and that's not his fault. But, all of those guys are the ones you were banking on to turn things around and make up for the fact that you weren't as aggressive and you took a kind of a risky bet on older players who were reaching the end of the 20s on the defensive line in front of them. For both of those to whiff, man, that's a problem where you wonder, okay, well, I don't know where we go from here other than a hard reset this offseason, and you can't be thinking that way already.
Monday night was the first time that I've watched the Bengals on defense and thought, God, they're slow.
Yeah.
And I started to just sort of click through all the guys on defense that just seemingly don't do anything. And maybe some of them will, because they'll grow into their roles, and many of them have. But I just, as the game unfolded, I kept, I hate to pick on Sam Hubbard because everybody loves him, but I watched Sam Hubbard and I'm like, dude's just out there. Joseph Osai is just out there. God love Von Bell and Geno Stone. They're just out there. I think the other thing is, and maybe this is a bit of an overreaction to one historic game, right? And this is something you guys could speak to better than I. But we always talk about the Bengals culture, okay? Well, when you have one area of the team that excels and the other area of the team that is awful, and yet the results are bad, what does that do for the team dynamic? What does that do for the culture that everybody prides themselves on with this franchise? I don't know the answer, but as I'm listening to Joe Burrow talk on Monday night, and as I'm thinking about, like, if I'm an offensive player, I'm like, did what we had to do. What do you want from us? I don't know if that sort of thing continues, not that it will look like it did on Monday, but if that sort of thing continues, I think maybe that's a really interesting test of the cherished culture that we talk so much about. But again, more mechanically, defensively, yeah, fine, get Rankins and Hill back, but is that going to look? They weren't great with those guys. We saw what happened week 1. We saw what happened with Ramondre Stevenson. We saw what happened week 1. Is that going to make up for a lot of the things we saw play out on Monday? Fair question.
Yeah, the culture thing's a good point, because we don't know what Zach's like behind closed doors, but he's not one of those. He's not a rant and rave. He'll get on officials, but you don't see him berate players. He doesn't do that in press conferences, and maybe you need that somewhere. And Joe Burrow talked about it he has to evaluate this. What kind of leader does he want to be? Like, who's going to be the guy that's going to take this team by the throat and say this is unacceptable and kind of give them the kick in the ass they need? Maybe it's a players only meeting at some point. I don't know if those sometimes seem overrated. Sometimes seem like a really an indicator that things are really bad. And 0-3 is about as bad as it gets, but I don't think that they're buried. But I do wonder if it's less X's and O's and more of the mentality that someone needs to step up. You've got quality leaders on this team, but none of them are. What was it early in early in the Andy Dalton, AJ Green era, and they were talking about those two guys being the leaders they were, but the sense was we need some dicks. We need some guys that can whip this team into shape. And I mean, Ted Karras, Von Bell, Joe Burrow, these guys are all kind of lead by example and quality veteran leaders. But can they find somebody to step up and really grab this team by the throat and force a new mentality?
It's a good question. I don't know that they have a problem with mentality or attitude. I think they have a problem with no pass rush. And when you're gonna, and granted, they're out there playing defensive tackles 5 through 7 on their original depth chart. Okay. And that harkens back to 2020 when they decided to stick with Lou, because they're just saying, look, at a certain point, it's not the coordinator's fault that Christian Covington is playing all the snaps, right? Like, or any of the people that you pull out. I mean, we're in similar levels with the defensive line right now. So I don't know. I don't know if that's it. I do think that Burrow needs to grow as a leader. And in terms of the fact that he does understand that his voice probably needs to be louder and a little harsher right now, and he needs to be part of the motivating group. We talked about this a lot at the end of last year. They're just they were losing so many people that were so foundational to everything that they were doing, and that wasn't just last year. That was over the course of a couple of years. Throwback to Jesse Bates, but when you lose guys like Chidobe Awuzie and Joe Mixon and DJ Reader and all these were your core tone setters. You need new ones, and maybe they're a little lost in that. But that to me always came back to because Joe Burrow needs to enter his second wave of Tom Brady era. Like, he needs to be the one. He's the guy that everybody looks at, and he should be the one setting that tone. And so perhaps that's what he was maybe referencing the other day. But I think that's on him, and I think they just need to be able to get after the passer a little bit, and then the mentality will be there.
Miles Murphy walks through the door just like Joe Burrow walked, the healthy Joe Burrow walk. Maybe that'll be the turnaround when Miles Murphy comes back in week 5.
We don't know that he's coming back in week 5. Why is that set in stone? I mean,
that's the earliest he can.
It's the earliest he can, but we don't know when that's happening. So again, it's just, how long are you gonna be pushing BJ Hill and Sheldon Rankins back early off their hamstring injuries? Is that the smart thing to do with these guys who are in their late 20s and dealing with a soft tissue injury that can linger throughout the season? I mean, there's a lot going on there. Speaking of a lot before you leave, Mo.
Yeah.
I need to talk to you about the Ohio Cup. I'm trying. I didn't know the Indians were going to take it to this level. Excuse me, the Guardians. I apologize there.
Look at this. Do you see the picture?
Look at this.
Look, there's the champagne. There's the Ohio Cup.
There's the Ohio Cup.
Stephen Vogt. And
the Guardians,
there's the Ohio
putting out a direct shot across the state, wearing the Cincinnati's in Kentucky t-shirts, or at least posting those.
Okay, hang on. Why is that funny?
I don't know, but they're taking shots.
Was born in the Bluegrass State, who's a proud Scott High School alum. This is the second time the Columbus Crew did this during the Hell is Real rivalry up there. Well, Cincinnati is really in Kentucky. Why is that funny? Why is that, as a native Kentuckian, why is that offensive? Why am I supposed to? Okay, great. Yes, I'm proud that we have Kentucky in the greater Cincinnati area.
Yeah.
What do they got in Northeast Ohio? A smelly lake? Like, what borders your state? Like, why is that
Cleveland's
funny?
Basically Pennsylvania. Is that where we want to go with this?
Pennsylvania's a fine place. Like, I want to know what's wrong with Kentucky.
Yeah.
Tell me, Guardians. What is wrong with Kentucky? So you know what? Now it's not just the Ohio Cup. It's the Ohio and Kentucky Cup.
The Ohio and Kentucky
You dragged
Cup.
my native state into this.
I mean, I didn't expect them to go there with it. The Ohio Cup has never been taken to this level that it deserves to be at, by the way. We needed some villains. We needed some animosity. And I think this only means one thing. I texted you this last night. Tito Francona must be the choice. Go for their heart. You got to do it. And you got to get Tito in there, and he's got to be prioritizing properly the cup.
The cup, yeah. Next year it's best of 6. It's back to best of 6.
Oh,
they play them 6 times, and it's going to be decided in June, so they can make this a bigger priority. What is the bigger social media surprise? The Guardians posting a picture of their manager spraying the clubhouse full of champagne with the cup right there, or the Reds' social media feeds not even acknowledging that they've changed managers.
It should just be one of those graphics that comes up that just says transaction, right, with a link.
They have no problem telling you that Ian Jabot started a minor league rehab assignment. Okay, great. I mean, you don't even I understand. They made their statement. There's no quote from Phil or Bob Castellini, which I don't understand. But nothing on @Reds anywhere. Nothing. And I went back and looked. When they fired Brian Price, they at least mentioned it. When they fired Dusty Baker, they at least mentioned it. Oh, wait a minute. Because I guess if I did somebody dirty, I wouldn't tweet about it either. So maybe there's the answer. But yeah, the Ohio Cup, the Guardians are leaning into this, which means the Reds need to prioritize it.
Yeah, I like the idea of a slow motion montage of every David Bell tossing. Like I could have gone for that. Like here's our favorite of David Bell right before he gets, sent out. What did it end up being? I mean, he's got the record, right?
He's got the record.
Yeah.
I think it's 32.
31 or 2. Yeah, whatever it
32.
ended up at. I think you just do that. I think that would have been a great way to go about it. Better than nothing, probably. All right. More
Nothing.
Ohio
They've
Cup talk next
nothing.
week. More Ohio Cup talk next week, Mo. I appreciate it. And I will be chatting with you this afternoon. You're going to be in Hamilton.
Hamilton, yes. Speaking of Kentucky.
Oh, man. Yes. We'll be in Hamilton today because I want to talk about, and maybe you guys can discuss this. What would be the funnier troll by the Panthers? Running consecutive tackle eligible plays for touchdowns to 2 different tackles, or the tackle eligible octopus, because the Bengals cannot defend this play.
Can't do it.
Where they throw a touchdown pass and then throw the subsequent 2-point conversion to the same tackle.
Yes.
On the touchdown pass.
Love it. Absolutely. So many possibilities. We can talk about that and more this afternoon on ESPN 1530. Make sure you are listening. If you're in Hamilton, because you're a Jay fan and you're like, let's go in the hood, go out to the B-Dubs. All right. Thanks, Mo. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
All right, spinning it forward now. There's one other thing. We spent a lot of time on the defense with Mo. Understandably, story of the week, story of the day, potentially story of the year as this thing goes forward. But I want to touch on one other thing from the game that I think is worth talking about as we start to compile a slightly larger sample size on this offense, which generally, when you draw up what you probably want the statistical breakdown to look like for this offense, it probably looks a lot like the box score that you had on Monday, where you had Zach Moss and Chase Brown were both efficient and effective. They got explosives in the run game from both of them. They caught the ball. Zach Moss had a reception, kind of an explosive on a reception. Jamar Chase with explosives. T. Higgins, you maybe would want his involvement obviously up a tick, but that happens. You had tight ends involved. You kind of were doing everything you wanted to do. Obviously, Burrow's numbers are great. That's probably the breakdown of what you want it to look like. But we've touched on this week by week, and one more data point on it. The Chase Brown, Zach Moss distribution continues to skew heavily to Zach Moss, and he seems to be the guy that they're putting into that passing down role, and they're comfortable with him as a pass protector, and he's just for now going to be that guy for the most part. And so it does account when they're trailing and passing a lot for the snap counts getting up to, he was at 76% versus 24 for Chase Brown. It's not as bad when you pull that out and you look just at early downs, early game. So here's something though I wanted to Jay, you're you're a connoisseur of stats, as we
Absolutely.
know. So I thought you might like a good one. Here is the, I guess, some running game numbers off of just early down. So first and second down and first, second, and third quarter from the first 3 weeks. So more of your normal neutral downs and what you've seen out of these two running backs. Zach Moss, 25 carries for 111 yards. That's 4.4 per carry. Nothing to sneeze at there. It's great. Offensive rush success percentage. You show your efficiency number at 40%. Nice, right? Chase Brown, only half as many carries at 12. But 12 for 86, averaging 7.2 per rush and a 67% success rate on those. His yards after contact per rush on those is 4.83 versus 2.7 for Zach Moss. Chase Brown's been eaten. And that's similar situations. We're filtering out some of the noise here. First and second down, first 3 quarters, 3 games of work now that you want a few more games to get a better judge. But as you heard Dan Pitcher talk about with us last week, there was a lot of small sample, and there's nothing where one guy is supposed to be getting that much more than the other. It feels like they still could use a lot deeper lean into Chase Brown, and you wonder how much more of that you'll see this week as these explosives continue to add up. He just hits, and taking numbers out of it, he just so clearly hits the hole so fast.
Yeah.
And that seems to be such a great fit for what they have. He opens them up for those out the back door runs that you saw. I mean, specifically a red zone, that run off the 20-yard line that got him down inside right near the goal line on Monday. He's just better at getting to those, which seem to fit this team as well. It feels like you need to see even more of a lean into Chase Brown, something we've been calling for. And I think that they, are obviously going to lean towards a little bit more. It just feels like they need to.
Yeah, I mean, everybody talks about his speed. When you think about speed, you think about straight line speed. But, I mean, it's just you watch it when they run those wide plays. There's times where it looks like he's not going to get the edge, and he does. And he blows right by the defender. The angle isn't right because he is so fast. And I do wonder, you're talking about the neutral downs, and how many of his explosive runs have been, on second and long, where they're maybe not expecting the run. They're looking more at that's a lot of teams take that more as a passing down. I have a stat for you as well that
all right,
the Bengals have had 34 third downs so far through 3 games. How many times has Chase Brown been on the field on those 34 third downs?
Hardly at all, right? Probably what?
0.
Wow.
Not a single third down snap this year.
Wow.
So that's even if you can find other ways, keep a tight end in to help protect. You can still put him in the backfield where you don't have to rely on him as a blitz pickup guy. Leak him out, get him in space, and throw him a check down. I know on third, not a check down, but a screen pass. If it's a third and short situation, you would just think they would want to lean into that. And just surprised that that's according to True Media. It's nothing I've charted myself, but I was really surprised to see that because it was 10 on Monday night against Washington. I was like, well, how many third downs has he played all year? And not a single one.
Not a single one. I mean, the one thing that we've heard Dan Pitcher consistently reference is that ability of Zach Moss to get that little bit extra, that shiftiness that he has, lateral kind of shiftiness and toughness that kind of comes with his game a little bit more. And maybe that explains his presence on third down, where they're just trying to get a little bit extra more and not thinking as much about the explosive. You can still get explosives on third down. I feel like that should be allowed, and maybe that's an area that he starts to chip into a little bit. But yeah, no, that is a very interesting development when you think about that. If that's going to be the case, should you just be getting the vast majority of first and second down snaps to Chase Brown, which is, similar to what we've seen in the past and how they would split it up when they were kind of in the Mixon Pirine mode. I mean, that's what it was. It was Mixon took all the normal downs, and then when you got into third downs and things like that, you got Zach Moss involved. We'll continue to monitor that, but man, 7.8 per carry. Just, at a certain point, I think you can see it. You can see how much more explosive they feel when they've got him going. All right. Let's get into wrapping this up a little bit here as we go. Let's recap a little bit of where what we did on Monday. So we had the Growler bet for Monday night's game. The Growler bet was Jamar Chase receiving yards. Was this going to be a Jamar Chase breakout game? What were we going to see from him? And Jamar Chase with 118 yards on 6 receptions, the 2 touchdowns, the explosives. It was from the jump, a Jamar night. Now, a lot of you were back on the right track. So some of these Growler bets this year, you guys have just not even been in the vicinity, maybe a little too hopeful. Well, this time a lot of you ended up in the area nearby, hanging out down the street. None of you came in the front door, though. Nobody came in. I had the Bookerman here on Twitter with 122. Nobody hits the 118. Some so close, close, but nobody could hit it. And shout out to a couple people came down and collected Growler bets from earlier this year, even one from last year. I believe the Dave Allen compromise, whatever we ended up calling it from last year, which much controversy, came down and was collected. And so that can be yours. We'll have more Growler bets going forward, but no winners off the Growler bet with Jamar Chase's from Monday night.
Do you remember what your guess was? Mine was 141. So I was really optimistic. I thought he was going to get there. He did not get there.
I believe I had lower. I don't think I had him up over 100 again. I didn't double check myself on that one, but I think I had him in not crossing the 100 yard mark. But I'd have to go and check the tape. Yeah. I got to watch the film. Look, I just can't. All right. We had a number of run passer boots that we discussed. Jay, you have some of them in front of you.
Yeah.
What were our run passer boots? And let's talk about how those turned out.
Yeah, well, one of them involved Chase Brown getting more involved. It was what happens first, a T. Higgins explosive, a Jamar Chase explosive, or Chase Brown gets his 5th touch. It was the Jamar explosive right off the bat, the 41-yard touchdown. I ran with Jamar. I passed on Chase Brown, and I booted T. Higgins. You flipped it. You thought T was really going to get involved early, and so you ran with T. Higgins, passed on Chase Brown, and booted Jamar. We rarely have one guy go with the run and one guy have that same pick as a boot, but I won that one. Well, actually, I was undefeated because the second one was Washington rushing yards under 100, over 200, or Jaden Daniels is the leading rusher. We both had the exact same answers. We both ran with under 100. They did make it up over 100. Then we passed on Daniels being the leading rusher. We booted over 200. Just never felt like that was going to be the case. So none of them happened. I mean, they went over 100, and Daniels was not the leading rusher. But I guess that's a tie because we picked the exact same thing. Our other run passer boots got to wait.
Was the leading rusher. Jaden Daniels had 12 for 39. He was the leading rusher. Robinson was 16 for 33.
Ooh.
And Eckler was 3 for 35.
You're right. For some reason I had Robinson higher. Okay.
No.
So either way, it's a tie.
Yeah, exactly.
And then our other one, we got to wait. We debated, we run passer, booted who the finishing order of the other 3 teams in the division. You ran with Pittsburgh. I ran with Baltimore as being the highest of the other 3. So we'll see. Pittsburgh 3-0. I still think Baltimore's the team to beat in the division, even with this slow start. Bengals can have a say in that in week 5.
Sure can. All right. Let's get to our RBs here and get out of here. You got any RBs for me from a wild weekend or anything like that?
Yeah, it kind of Monday night it reminds you, it humanizes these guys a little bit more, where I wanted to go over and talk to Amarius Mims about making his debut, and just as I headed that way, here comes Trent Brown out of the training room on crutches, his knee in a brace, and just just kind of step back and watch the interactions and Amarius went to him first, and then Alex Kappa came over and Ted Karras, and you just see the human side of it, the disappointment in their eyes and how they felt for him, knowing in that moment it's your season's over. Likely your Bengals career is over. He's here on a 1-year deal. No one expects him to be here next year. It's just such a finality. And I think that people get into the fantasy football mode too much where you replace one guy with the next. And it was kind of striking. The disappointment of the loss, I think, kind of took a backseat for a few minutes there. And it was the disappointment of, as Amarius Mims said, losing a brother. And he said an older brother, a guy that's really taken me under the wing and done so much for me. And he had a hard time even answering questions about the game because his thoughts kept coming back and his comments kept coming back to Trent Brown.
Yeah, it's probably the hardest part about our jobs, I think, are when you go into a post-game locker room when a devastating injury has happened. And that's win or loss. Like, there's just, the tone is always different. And, that was the way it felt with Trent Brown, because these guys, they can clear their heads. They can move forward. They can go and look and say, look, finish the game and focus on winning. But the moment it ends and they get into that locker room, especially if they see the guy, it really hits them again, all over again, that spot they're on. So it's almost fresh. And then we show up and we're all asking questions about it, or talking to people who are tangentially involved or whatever. I think generally everyone tries to keep their distance from any of these guys that have been hurt. I've talked to them before and asked questions before, and it's never easy. It's something we have to do sometimes, but never easy. That's always a hard one. Mine is a few other stories from our live show that we did, because it was just, again, I sort of mentioned on the walkout, it was so awesome to see so many people that we've either interacted with through emails or on Twitter or whatever, or just people that listen forever. And so many of you coming up and talking to us afterwards. And it was just really cool. I just feel really lucky that we have such a great group of listeners and readers and all of that stuff. It's awesome. I appreciate you guys so much. But a couple of them stood out to me. One, a guy who's coming in from Australia and is doing a month-long Bengals tour. This is awesome. In from Australia, like, gonna do a couple of weeks here and there, and said, no. I'm doing a month. Started with the Kansas City game, is going to be going all the way through the Baltimore game. For his sake, I hope the Bengals win one of those. It's a long way to come and now be 0-2 and see two generally heartbreaking L's, but great spirits. It was so cool to hear about that. Also, our friend Andy came from over from England, from the United Kingdom. He brought an Everton flag for me.
Yeah.
Shout out Andy for bringing the Everton flag. I it's hard to proudly fly it. Maybe if they get their first Premier League win of the season anytime soon, maybe I'll have to put it up there. Now they're currently 0-4-1, but it was awesome for him to bring that over. And then Jay, he got something for you too.
Yeah, a deck of playing cards, Iron Maiden on I think it was called Top Trump. It's a game that is popular over there. I had not heard of it, but I can't wait to dive into it and see how that game works. And big Iron Maiden fan. I'm surprised I ever had a girlfriend in college, because my entire dorm room, my entire off-campus room was just covered in Iron Maiden posters.
Yeah, Iron Maiden doesn't usually lure the ladies.
No, it doesn't. No,
but appreciate that. And also, it was awesome to see our good friend Natasha B, who is in from Hawaii. Her husband was there. Great to have them in. She was saying, though, her night was going to be ruined if they lost, and the whole 4-day trip was going to be ruined if they lost. So, Natasha B, I hope you didn't feel like it was ruined, and that you did enjoy some of yourself. I apologize, because we wanted to make you Graders Worthy, but the one thing, Graders Worthy can do everything except, man, you can't ship dairy to Hawaii.
Yeah.
So it's an
Long
issue. Okay. It's a long way to go. So shout out to you anyway. We did have Graders Worthy, our good friend and fellow girl dad from Georgia that was in town. We decided that right there, that was Graders Worthy. They were in for the game and came to the show and was telling me all about, being a girl dad and loving the Bengals and being a fan of the podcast. So shout out to everybody that came. It was great to see so many of you and had a blast. Look forward to seeing you guys at the next one against Philly. Anybody that's coming into town, it's a fun party and always great to see everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it was exciting. It was humbling to know that many people came from that far away. And you guys inspired me because we talked about we recorded the walkout at 2:30 in the morning. I get home, I go to bed at 4. I wake up to my wife yelling for the cat. The cat was outside. It was storming. She's trying to get so it's 7:30. I had 3.5 hours of sleep. And I was like, I really don't want to get up and start this day. But I was like, those poor Bengals fans that came from Hawaii and California and Minnesota and England, they have to get up and travel home. I can get up and roll out of bed and get to my computer and start working. So you guys were on my mind on Tuesday morning, and I hope everybody had a safe flight home.
Yeah. Inspiring is what it is.
Yes.
Love that. That's awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with more. We'll have some reaction from talking to Anarumo today, hearing from Joe Burrow. It's the night practice situation. So everything's going to be later in the day. So we'll get up tomorrow morning inspired by you and give you a lot of reaction to everything that's happening down at the stadium. You'll hear from our good friend from Carolina, Joe Person, to give some updates on what's going on as Andy Dalton has taken over down there. A lot to talk about with him. So we'll get to that. And of course, Who Day Light will be coming your way on Friday. We are short week, but we're shoving it all in for you, making sure all your content is here. So thanks everybody for listening, and we will talk to you next time. Have a good one, everyone.